Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today's video is going to be about plasma membranes. So we have been talking about the cell, and all living organisms are made of cells. And I've mentioned this before, but the cell has like an outer layer. That outer layer is called a plasma membrane. And so that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. Just the outer layer of a cell. So we're going to title our notes Plasma Membrane. And all membranes are made of phospholipids. We've talked about phospholipids before. So, and I want to point out that all membranes are made of phospholipids, but the plasma membrane is just the membrane of the outer part of the cell, so the skin of the cell. And so it gets a special name because it's like the main membrane. But there are lots of little things inside the cell that have membranes also. But I'm only focusing on the membrane that is the skin of the cell, okay? Okay, so what I would like to do is go through all the components of the plasma membrane and talk about each one, okay? So there are three major components in the plasma membrane. And so I'm going to pull in a picture of a cell first so you know what we're talking about. Let's see here. And we saw this picture in another video. And the plasma membrane is just this orange part, okay? All cells have plasma membranes. All bacteria have plasma membranes, animal cells, plant cells, okay? So this is the same for all living organisms, okay? And so in this picture, the plasma membrane is the orange part, just the orange part. And so this is what the plasma membrane is made of. The first thing, and we've talked about this already, is phospholipids. So let me just put a little subtitle. So the composition of the plasma membrane is the following. The first thing, so I'm going to list three things, are phospholipids. And we've talked about phospholipids when we talked about lipids, and what they are is a phospholipid is made of two parts. It is made of a phosphate head, which is a glycerol. So the glycerol has 3 carbons, and on one of the carbons, we've got a phosphate group, okay? So that is called the phosphate head. And so I'm just gonna draw it like in a circle like this. And attached to the phosphate head, we have 2 fatty acid tails. And so I'm just gonna draw it like this. Each bend is a carbon, and always we have double bonds in the carbon, between the carbons, which cause this little kink, which means it is unsaturated. Okay, so all the phospholipids in a cell membrane are unsaturated, which give it these little legs that kick up, okay? So let me just put some labels on here. Let's see, blue. So this is gonna be the polar head. And these are the fatty acid tails. Okay, and what I want to point out, and I've talked about this before, is that the heads, they love water, but the tails hate water. Okay, so I'm going to add that here in my description. I'm going to say the polar head loves water, and the fatty acid tails hate water. Okay, they repel water. And as you know, oil repels water. You can't mix oil and water together. So this is a perfect thing to make a membrane because cells are in a watery environment and they're going to separate themselves out from the water, okay? So the composition of a plasma membrane is this. It is made of phospholipids. And I've explained this before, but what happens is when you throw a bunch of phospholipids into a cup of water, they automatically get into this configuration where all the heads are on the top and all the heads are on the bottom and the tails are in between. Okay, so I'm going to draw this. And so I'm just going to, like, let's say I'm taking a little section out of the plasma membrane from the cell. And this is what it looks like if you zoom in. You have all the heads that are together on the top, and then all the heads are together on the bottom. And you have the fatty acid tails in between. Okay, so there's one fatty acid tail, there's another, and they're unsaturated, which means they kick each other. Let me just speed up here a little bit. This is going to take a long time. So some of them kick up, not all of them. Okay, so we've got these fatty acid tails that are kicking each other, and that means they are unsaturated. Okay, so I'm going to point this out here. This is an unsaturated fatty acid. Unsaturated phospholipid. And because it is unsaturated, the legs are kinked. And this kinking of the legs, what it does is it provides room to move. And so that room to move means that this is going to be a liquid at room temperature. Okay, and that's what an oil is. An oil is a liquid at room temperature. So I'm going to say this unsaturated phospholipid allows for movement. Allows for movement. Okay, and what that means is it's a liquid at room temperature. Okay, so this is the major component of a plasma membrane, are phospholipids. It is the main thing that it's made of. And it gets in this configuration. This configuration is called a phospholipid bilayer. Okay, so because there's two layers, it's called a phospholipid bilayer. Okay, and like I said, all membranes are made of phospholipids, and all membranes are a phospholipid bilayer. Okay, for all the organelles inside the cell, and including the plasma membrane. Okay, so phospholipids are one component of the plasma membrane. There are two more. The next thing that is found in the plasma membrane are proteins. Hang on, let me just make sure I have this in order. Okay, so number 2 is proteins. Okay, and the proteins there are two kinds. There are one type of protein that only hangs out on the heads. So only on the top or only on the inside of the cell, okay? And so I'm going to draw a cell here just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So here's a cell, okay? And inside the cell, we have a nucleus. So this is where the DNA goes. And this is the plasma membrane, this outside part, okay? This little section here of the plasma membrane, I'm just going to say is this part right here. So I'm going to put a little square around the plasma membrane, and that's what this is. So I just want you to envision that this double layer goes all the way around the cell, okay? And it's not just like one-dimensional, it's three-dimensional, so it's a sphere, okay? And so the proteins, there are two types of proteins. The first type is called a peripheral protein. A peripheral protein, and I just want you to think for a second what a protein is. Proteins are made of amino acids. They are made on ribosomes, and the ribosomes put together these amino acids, which are those balls. Remember, there are 20 different amino acids, and then when that's made, it forms a three-dimensional shape, okay? And so there are proteins in the plasma membrane that serve a lot of functions. They're very important. But some of the proteins, they're called peripheral, and what that means is they're only found on the periphery. Okay, so for example, I'm going to just draw a peripheral protein here. I'm going to make it blue, and I'm just going to make it like this. Okay, and so it is only touching the heads of the phospholipids. Okay, so that is an example. So let me just put an arrow here so you can see what I'm talking about. And so that just means it doesn't go all the way through the plasma membrane. It's just only touching the heads. So these proteins stick to a hydrophilic head of a phospholipid. Okay, so remember the phospholipid has the head that loves water, is called hydrophilic, and that's what sticks to these proteins. So peripheral protein is only on the outside. You could also have one on the inside too. So I'm gonna draw another one here. Okay, I'll just make it a little bit smaller just so you know that there are different shapes and sizes of these proteins. So peripheral protein is just gonna stick to the heads of the phospholipids. The second type of protein, let me get another color, is called an integral protein. And an integral protein is one that goes all the way through the plasma membrane. So I'm going to draw it here. Let me do it like this. So I'm going to draw it like this. Oh, that's not a very good drawing, but that's okay. There we go. That's an integral protein. And the difference is that it goes all the way through from the inside of the plasma membrane to the outside of the plasma membrane. And remember, right here, we have our cell. And so an integral protein is going to go all the way through. Whoops. I'm just going to draw a little line like that. And one of the functions of an integral protein is called a channel. Okay, so I'm going to put example function, and there are more than one function. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a few examples. One of them is a channel, which is like kind of like an open straw that allows things to come into the cell or allows things to go out of the cell. Some of these channels are very specific, so they only allow a certain chemical. So for example, calcium. There are calcium channels that only allow calciums into the cell. And so it has a very specific shape that only fits calcium. And some of the channels are closed and then can be opened. Some of the channels are always open. So it just varies depending on what channel you're talking about. Another function of an integral protein is called a gap junction. And what this is it goes all the way through the plasma membrane, but it hooks on to a neighbor cell. Okay, so let me just draw another cell here. So let's just say this is another cell. Let me just scoot over so you can see what I'm talking about. So here is another cell. Okay, and then here's the nucleus of the other cell. And let's say the cell is touching here and we need like a hook. So sometimes there are these proteins that will hook one cell to another cell so that the cells stay together. Okay, so that's another function. And so that's just two examples of functions for integral proteins. Okay, so far we've talked about phospholipids are part of a plasma membrane. The second thing are proteins, and there are two kinds. There's the kind that stick just to the outside of the cell, or we could have integral proteins which go all the way through the cell membrane. Okay, the last thing is a sterol. Okay, a sterol is this other thing that we find in cells, only eukaryotic cells, and they are found on the inside of the plasma membrane. And I'm going to draw them here as hot pink. Okay, so if I were to ask you to draw a plasma membrane, all its parts, you would be able to draw this. So sterols are on the inside. I'm going to draw and what they do is they provide more flexibility. So it is very important that the plasma membrane is able to move, and it's very important that the proteins are able to move like through them. And so sterols add an extra component that allows for movement. Okay, so I already told you that the unsaturated fatty acid tails kick out and they put some space in between the phospholipids, which allows for movement, but sterols also does this. Okay, so you'll find sterols on the inside, which just makes some room so that the lipids can move. Okay, so it keeps it a liquid, keeps it an oil. So sterols, I'm going to say, are found on the inside of the plasma membrane. in the inside of the plasma membrane and allow for the membrane to be more liquid, like fluid, okay, and allows it to be fluid, okay, and I'm just going to put in parentheses liquid, okay, and it's very important that the plasma membrane is liquid. Okay, and so I just want to point out that in animals, the sterol that we have in our plasma membranes is called cholesterol. So I'm just going to put this in parentheses. Animals have cholesterol. And so cholesterol has kind of a bad reputation, right? So animals have cholesterol. That's a type of sterol that we have. It's cholesterol. And so, like I said, cholesterol has a bad reputation. If you eat too much cholesterol, it's bad for you. It could plug up your arteries, but you do have to have some, and it comes in handy in the plasma membranes because it keeps your plasma membranes nice and fluid. Okay, so that's it for today's lecture. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.